Standing as we light the chalice of our heritage, and it is found at number 362, Rise Up, O Flame, in your great hymnal.
We're just going to say the words, not sing them.
Sorry. Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing. Show to us beauty, vision, and joy.
Please remain risen and join in singing our opening hymn, number 345, With Joy We Claim the Growing Light. With joy we claim the growing light, advancing thought and widening view, the larger freedom clearer sight, which from the old unfold the new. With wider view come loftier goal, with fuller light more good to see, with freedom truer self-control, with knowledge deeper reverence be. Please be seated.
Good morning. I'd like to invite those young and young at heart to join me on the carpet circles for a story. Hi, good morning. Hello. Hi. Hi. Hi, good morning. Good morning. So nice. Look at all these young and young at hearts. Warms my heart. It really does. Any stragglers? Young at heart stragglers? No? Well, you're welcome at any time. Today I'm going to share a story called A Tale of Three Villagers and Villages by Renee Rashowski. There once were three travelers whose village was flooded. Together they set out for higher ground to find a new home. As they journeyed, they reminisced in stories of their former home and loved ones lost to the flood. As they crossed over the mountains, they saw a sheltered, fertile valley beyond, with three small villages. One said, "This land looks a lot like home, but I'm a bit nervous to meet new people." The second said, "We have become good friends. We trust each other, and we share our tasks fairly." The third said, "Let's ask good questions at each village to help us find a new home." Over their fire that night, they came up with two questions. How does your village make decisions? And what happens when you don't agree? When they entered the first village, the villagers told them, "We have a powerful ruler who decides what is best for our village. The ruler's family has been in charge for many generations. If we have a disagreement, the ruler just decides for us." The travelers looked at each other with tight lips, then thanked the villagers and continued on their journey. When they entered the second village, they asked, "How does your village make decisions?" The villagers responded, "We vote for a few people to represent us on the council. We vote for people who promise to make decisions that are best for all of us." Then the travelers asked, "What happens if you don't agree with what the council says?" "Sometimes we don't like all the things that they decide, but we have to do it." The travelers looked at each other with disappointed eyes, and they said thank you and goodbye to those villagers as well. As they trudged to the third village, they talked amongst themselves. One said, "That sounded good at first, but was it really better than the one with the village with the ruler?" Another said, "Not really. Some people have a bigger say." And the third said, "After the others vote for them, the people on the council just do whatever they want." In the third village, they soon found some villagers to talk about their decision-making there. One villager smiled and said, "Come, we will show you." The villagers formed a large circle and invited the travelers to join them. A villager wearing a special necklace said, "We welcome you into our circle. If you would like to stay, you must accept our agreements. Speak the truth, keep your promises, and honor the care of this circle as part of the earth and sky." The travelers looked at each other with shining eyes, and they agreed. Another villager explained, "This is how we make important decisions, by listening to each other in turn under these agreements until a decision is made. This is also how we disagree, by listening to each other in turn. Sometimes we agree to disagree, but we disagree with respect and peace." The travelers smiled widely. They had found their new home. So why do you think the travelers decided to stay in the third village? Anybody? Anybody? Because it was accepting and loving and inclusive. Yeah, it sounds like that. Anybody else? Everybody gets a chance to talk. That's very you. Anybody else? Anybody else? What is important to the people in the third village? What values do you notice in their agreements? And I'll remind you, their agreements were: speak the truth, keep your promises, honor and care for this circle as part of the earth and sky. What is important to the people in the third village? Truth, listening, respect. No one's left out. Yeah, I like that. Anybody else? And last couple questions. What are the values that the people that you live with share? And what rules do you go by to help y'all live those values together? Community. At our house, we value kindness, respect, equality, compromise. Say it again. Don't lie. That's a good one. I like that one. Very good. It kind of reminds me of our covenant, right? A list of agreements of how we say that we're going to be together, and then remind each other of our covenant, so we always know that this is what we value, and this is how we agree to be in community and in conflict with one another. So thank you all so much for your contributions and for joining me for the Time for All Ages. You're welcome to stay here or play in the table or go in the nursery, wherever you feel most comfortable.
So now is the time we offer up a brief prayer or meditation before we enter into a time of silence, after which we'll share together our meditation hymn, Voice Still and Small. And I told Henry yesterday that I'd be totally prepared for this prayer, and I'm totally unprepared. And maybe part of it is just how overwhelming things have been over the last weeks, months, years, and in some ways, part of why I wanted to lead service today. So I guess that I will just open up from my heart the prayer that we come together, that we lift each other up, that we share with one another, that we are there for one another, that we know that we are not alone and that we can overcome together. So with that, I offer Amen, Ashe, so may it be.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In dark and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain, singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing.
So I have for us a responsive reading as the reading before the sermon today. So if you can open your hymnals to 512, we give thanks this day. I will read the regular text and you reply with the italicized. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies, filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations. We give thanks this day. For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons. For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements. For our human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression. For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared. For all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, and who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom. For human liberty and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose. We give thanks this day. We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. thank you again to Jefferson for his ability to just come in and provide wonderful music for us on the spur of the notice. And I also want to thank Katie again for her story for Time for All Ages. I love when our stories and our sermons coincide and build upon one another. And it was a perfect story and the beginnings of a way, I think, for our young people, our children, to think about the hard work that we all do as you use to be true to ourselves. I think I began thinking about this service after we had a very difficult vote in our congregation to deal with our kind of difficult present situations, the ups and downs that we've been facing. And I think a lot of us who were in that room together thought that the vote would be more divided and contentious. And in the end, it was unanimous. We all came to the same place. And I think we all came to the same place because we were all of one heart, even if we were not all of one mind. And so that began me thinking about consensus and how the idea of consensus can help us think through our ways forward that are in many ways perhaps going to become only more difficult, perhaps even more contentious. And all of that brought me back to my first experience with consensus. So I went to college in a pretty hippy-dippy place where, we didn't have pass, no pass. We had credit, no entry. So if you didn't earn your credit, there's just nothing there on your transcript. But the idea, of course, was that you were willing to try things. You were willing to risk. And I loved that. So in this place, we had one of the largest cooperative housing and dining systems in the United States. More than 1,000 students participated. That was essentially about a third of all students not living in dorms, but instead in cooperative houses from, let's say as few as 10 people to as many as 200. And as co-op members, we were stewards of our co-ops. We cooked, we cleaned, we planned, we ordered supplies, we set our own rules. That's where I learned to cook for 150 people at one time, to make bread for 150 people, pizza for 150 people, soup for 150 people. And it's where we learned to try to live our values as members. Every cooperative on campus, for example, had its own, required every member to do at least 2 hours of kitchen cleanup duty each week. Didn't matter how you spent the majority or the rest of your volunteer time. You might be a meal planner, or you might be dealing with suppliers, kind of the quote-unquote more glamorous work, but everybody got their hands dirty. And that was a kind of an essential that we all believed. Everybody should have to do every kind of job, no matter. And there were people who loved KP duty. Like if they could have done that and nothing else, they would have. And the cooperatives were really an amazing experience. And in many ways, being a UU reminds me of those days. Cooperatives are guided by a set of values: self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, and solidarity, and a set of 7 principles: voluntary and open membership, democratic member control, member economic participation, autonomy and independence, education, training, and information, cooperation among cooperatives, concern for community. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? I mean, and indeed, I would argue that both are covenantal organizations. We make promises to one another as members. And one of those promises that we share in common is the principle of democracy. And I don't know how much thought you've given to that principle as amongst all the principles. It's not one that I hear brought up super often, except for kind of the way in which we do things. But in some ways, I think it may seem like it's obvious. We all believe that we can believe as we wish, right? Our right of conscience. and we can pursue change in our congregations and in society at large through democratic practice. It's fairly straightforward. But one of the most important UU forebears, Theodore Parker, not so fast. He was looking around him in the late 1840s. The U.S. was warring against Mexico, a neighboring republic. Slavery seemed to be tightening its grip on the United States ever more intensely. And the one thing, and what Parker felt was that we were wrestling with two visions of democracy. The one that seemed to be taking over argued, I am as good as you, so get out of my way. The other, the one that we have embedded in our fifth principle that Parker lifted up, was you are as good as I, so let us help one another. Let me say that again. Democracy means you are as good as I, so let us help one another. It's a very different conception of what democracy is, what the role of democracy is, and I think it's a very different way of thinking about how it fits into our principles. My first practical encounter with questions like this came when I joined my first college co-op. Co-op meetings took place at meal times, usually lunch or dinner, and maybe it was a Midwestern thing, but once people had sat down to eat, they usually wouldn't leave, even if the meeting got overlong and boring. But I remember vividly my first co-op meeting. And I sit down, and a facilitator stands up, and he says, okay, first order of business is deciding how to decide. What? What are we doing? I felt like Alice in Wonderland, right? Like, how can we ask to be doing something before we've done it? You know, yes, I would like more tea, but I haven't had any yet. But I guess in the end, it's like the Big Bang. You know, something isn't, and then it is. So in any event, most cooperatives choose some variation of basic democratic voting. The vast majority of the co-ops made decisions based on pure majority, except for more complex issues which required a 2/3 majority. But one co-op stood out, Harkness Hall. Even the name, it's like Hogwarts before Hogwarts, right? Harkness. They were going to take a different path. They always, from the beginning, chose consensus as their decision-making process. And as a first-time co-op member, and in one of the other co-ops, I thought, well, that's crazy. And in fact, I think most people who didn't live in Harkness thought, that's crazy. Like, it's hard enough. We have to figure out how to, decide to decide. How are we going to do that in any consensus-like form? And we would have, half-hour discussions about the ratio of 2% milk to whole milk, or whether cheese should be a free graze food that you could just grab out of the fridge at any time. The answer was no. And then the votes would be contentious. We were college kids. How on earth could Harkness organize by consensus? Well, I learned. I had a good friend who lived in Harkness, and so I'd periodically join him for lunch or dinner, and it was an eye-opening experience. I'm not sure I remember the exact question up for debate at the time, but it was something like this. Should we be buying margarine, given how bad it is for you and how terrible it tastes? Like I said, everything was open for debate, and the stakes often seemed small. The discussion began, and it was vigorous. Folks had strong feelings all around. But what emerged was that those who wanted to keep margarine in the co-op's fridge were vegans. And as the vegans entered the fray, the debate took on a more pointed character, one that seemed to divide people into camps. The debate became more strident. The anti-margarine contingent felt attacked for being perhaps anti-vegan, when all they wanted was to promote better health. I quietly nibbled at my stir-fried tofu and watched, thinking, oh, Harkness, this is your cross to bear. I was feeling a little smug, about my own co-op. Admittedly, we did have our 2% whole milk debate, but. But amidst this back and forth, one person eventually raised their hand to speak, and his words reframed the debate. He said, "Look, honestly, I don't really care for butter or margarine. If I had my choice, we would use olive oil on everything. But I know that I'm part of a tiny minority here. Olive oil is my preference, but that's all it is. I could insist, but for me, there are other, much more important and pressing discussions to be had. I imagine, upon reflection, that the same is actually true for the fans of butter. And if I'm being truthful, if I can't have olive oil, I will take butter. I don't like margarine. But the consequences for the vegans are of a different order. It matters to them in a different way. And I propose that we keep both of them and move on to our next business." And it was quiet for a few seconds. And then one of the butter folks said, "Well, so long as we can keep butter, I'm okay with it." And a few murmurs went through the crowd. And then finally, one of the room facilitators said, "So I think we have consensus. Any dissents?" And the room was quiet. And that was it. Peace was restored to the land. Everybody was smiling and chatting, finishing up their meals. And this too was different from my co-op. Such a contentious debate would have ended in exhaustion and perhaps even hurt feelings on the losing side. And this experience changed then how I thought about consensus and how I thought about coming to terms with difficult issues. I had imagined consensus as a kind of knockdown, drag-out fight until inertia dragged everybody to the same position. But it's not necessarily, or even frequently, the positions that change, it's the people. Consensus-driven debate should inspire honesty and produce clarity. And with practice, it should foster trust, and indeed a better knowing of oneself. Beloved community is much the same way. It is not something we simply join. It is not something we vote on. It is instead something we commit ourselves to building with our gifts and our faults. It is work, and it is not easy. So I want to switch gears a little and ask us to think about this and feel it in ourselves in a different way by doing a bit of a musical meditation. Do not worry, I am not going to sing. It is not even singable music. But I think this is an apt metaphor for us in times of uncertainty. We are together, but chaos pulls us apart. We work so hard to keep it all together, and then it all seems all the more jangly and, well, unmusical. We're moving from one rhythm we can understand to a cacophony that seems hard. But the seeds of return are always in the music. Remember that in this congregation, we do not covenant to be perfect, but we do promise to call each other back into covenant as needed and help everyone to be our best selves. We seek to be open to risk and vulnerability and trust others to do the same. We seek to learn and grow with one another and listen with our whole hearts and speak from the heart. We seek to stay in relationship, especially during conflict. Our covenant, in many ways, is a call to consensus. So close your eyes and relax. Sit comfortably with your feet on the ground, rooted to this sacred space. Let's take some deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. Here we go. Breathe in through the nose. Hold it a few seconds. And out through the mouth. And again, in and out. In and out. Allow yourself to connect with this space and the people within it. What do you hear? What do you feel? Where are you in this space? See yourself sitting in it in your mind's eye and look around you. Who else is there? Who is sitting next to you, behind you, in front of you? This is our congregation. Now bring yourself back to your breathing, in and out, in and out. Now I'm going to play a piece of music while you keep your eyes closed, and I was trying to think about how to describe it, and I think what I'm going to describe it is heart music. It's a piece by Stephen Reich called Clapping Music, and it's a deceptively simple piece. It's two people clapping together in rhythm, and the rhythm is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, over and over again. But as they progress, one of the two clappers moves out of rhythm. Same set of notes, but in a skipping a beat, and then skipping a beat, and then skipping a beat. And at first it has this almost kind of jazzy feel to it, but soon it feels really out of sync, almost uncomfortable. But they begin to return to one another, the first person almost like a lighthouse, signaling to the drifting partner how to come home. The piece is about 3 minutes long, and as we listen to the sound, let it wash over you with its rhythmic comfort, through its jangly discomfort, and back. Hear it? You can open your eyes. One of the many things I love about that piece is that at the moment that they are closest to being back in sync, they are the farthest apart. It seems so close to everything falling apart, but they trust each other, they call each other, and they respond. The life of the co-op flowed fairly easily. We were friends who shared a commitment. We cooked, we cleaned together. But I remember towards the spring of that first year, things did start to fall apart a bit. Some people were just not pulling their weight. They would miss work shifts or skip out on house cleaning days, or some days they would take their food and leave the dining room when serious discussions began. What to do? Other co-ops were struggling with the same issues, and maybe we could follow their lead. Several had a, I swear, quote unquote, wheel of punishment, like The Price is Right. You would spin, and if you got lucky, there was one spot called Get Off Scot-Free. Another might be marked Extra KP Duty. Still another, stand on a table in the student union and sing the school song at the top of your lungs. Somebody said, maybe we should just expel them. Can we do that? You know, like 3 strikes and you're out? And right then, the door to the kitchen banged open, and out thundered a guy whose name I have written here, but I've decided I'm not going to tell you his name, because it doesn't matter. But imagine Shrek morphed into a human body. He was quiet, but imposing. Around campus, he wore army surplus and usually had a shaved head. And that was all fine. It was his eyebrows that set most people off, or the lack thereof, I suppose I should say. He shaved his eyebrows off quite frequently, and I don't know, maybe our brain is just wired to want eyebrows on a face. But it was just, it just set you off a little bit. Every time you saw him, you're like, So you can imagine, all eyes turned to face the kitchen. And he stares back and he says, "What is wrong with you people? We are not managers at a McDonald's, and we're not just consumers either. This is not a capitalist enterprise. We are a cooperative. McDonald's separates managers from workers and customers. Each has their own goals and their own logic, and the system alienates them all from one another." His passion was actually quite contagious, and I also thought, someone's been doing their marks. But he took a breath and he said, why do people miss shifts? Why don't people show up? Do they have an exam? Have they been spending time with a new girlfriend? Do they think people don't like them? Who knows? But that's what it means to be in a cooperative. You figure it out. You don't just throw them under the bus. And with that, he swept back into the kitchen, the door slammed behind him, and we sat in stunned silence. He was absolutely right. We had forgotten our own covenant. We shelved the wheel of punishment, as fun as it might have been, and began to think about ways to reconnect, but also for those who felt overwhelmed by the shifts and plans and meetings that they nevertheless always showed up for them to be able to say, I'm exhausted. I think I can't make that meeting. I need a break. We will be faced with many challenges in the months ahead. We will discuss and we will vote. And let me be honest, we will make decisions. And let me call upon us, in all of this to make our decisions, not as a product of exhaustion or alienation, but as emerging from a crucible of honesty and truth. The church is not a building. The church is not a person. The church is us. The church is our commitment. May we always call each other back back to that commitment, back to our best selves, back from chaos to love, back from uncertainty to love, always to love. So may it be. Amen.
Generosity is a spiritual discipline. Let us practice it together now in the offering, which you can put in the plate or deposit electronically by texting the word GIVE to 504-608-7030. Again, that's 504-608-7030.
Abundance of my life, this me, our ministries, and the world. Please rise in body or spirit for our chalice extinguishing. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Please remain as you are and join in singing our closing hymn, number 1052 in the Teal hymnal, The Oneness of Everything. Far beyond the grasp of hands, or light to meet the eye, past the reaches of the mind. There find the key to nature's harmony, in an architecture so entwined. Like the birds whose patterns grace the sky, and carry all who join love expanding, the message of peace will rise in flight, taking the weight of the world upon its wings, in the oneness of everything. Harvest in a dance of trees, who stir before the first breath of wind is yet perceived. Trust in the song becoming one with the dance, and a mystery and be believed. Songs of life and love touch our own are written in the earth ever bearing. Now to maintain the harmony, give to all lives with living, for the oneness of everything. Still we seek to find a truth that we might understand and reduce to terms defined. Vast and immeasurable time and space, also overwhelmingly designed. Oh, passing years despite, I know the faith that winters in the heart, to be born in spring, to hear and to feel the pulse of life enters my soul as a song to sing of the oneness of everything.
This church is a place in our hearts and a way we live our lives. Wherever and however we gather, we bring and share the spirit of love and life. Let us invite that spirit to fill us now as we enter into the world. Please turn and greet your neighbor and join us afterwards for some coffee and snacks.